Good afternoon. I am so pleased to welcome all of you to the Leo Baeck Institute and the Center for Jewish History. My name is William Weitzer. I'm the Executive Director of the Leo Baeck Institute. For those of you who don't know us, we were founded in 1955. Our mission is to preserve and promote the history and culture of German-speaking Jewry. Our research library and archive contain the most significant collection of source material relating to the history of German-speaking Jews from its origins to the tragic destruction of that culture by the Nazis, and continuing to the present German Jewish population. At LBI, we maintain historical records. We have an 80,000 volume library. We have 8,000 objects of art and artifact, and 3.5 million documents. But our work doesn't stop there. We're committed to having events like this, and I hope you had a chance to see the beautiful exhibit on burning words upstairs. And we have another exhibit called Stolen Heart that's about Berlin in the 1930s. But today we're going to go back 500 years from now, or 400 years from 1930s Berlin, to burning words. This whole event was inspired by Peter Wortsmann, who translated the Reuchlin book and wrote a play about it, and you're going to hear readings from it today. And it's been a year and a half in the planning, and we're very happy to have it here today. Imagine a time period when Reuchlin wrote his pamphlet defending Jewish books. The printing press was 70 years old and becoming much more widespread. The Jews had been expelled from Spain 20 years before. Martin Luther was going to nail his theses on the church door in Wittenberg only 6 years later. It's a fascinating time, and that's what this play will represent. I want to thank Joel Levy for being here, the president of the Center for Jewish History. And I have many other thanks to give. I will go through them. The Adler Family Foundation for their contribution to the exhibit, the David Berg Foundation, the Adler Foundation to this event, the David Berg Foundation to the exhibit, the Hertz family from the Frank L. Hertz collection of Renaissance books. The books, 500-year-old books in this exhibition are just fantastic. Peter Wortsmann, who I mentioned already, the writer and the translator of Reuchlin's book. Max Schulman, the director. Catalina Vicens, who wrote the music that you will enjoy. Magda Tedder, who's from Fordham University, and will provide scholarly commentary. Just to be clear, there's the play and there's the commentary. Laura Leone from the Center for Jewish History, who helped with the exhibit, as did Renata Evers and Renata Stein from the Leo Baeck Institute. So I sincerely thank those people, but I know that you're here for the event. So what's going to happen is readings with commentary and music. Then we will have a panel, and afterwards we'll be able to continue the conversation with a reception up in the Great Hall. So please enjoy the event.
Good afternoon and welcome to our performance of Peter Wortsman's play, Burning Words. My name is Magda Tedder, as you heard, and I'm here to offer you background and context for today's play. I will pop in and out of the play. I'll be sort of your commercial/historical break. Burning Words is an artistic interpretation of complicated historical events. And today we are only seeing a truncated version of the play, but it does help to bring to life some of the conflicts and negotiations that led to the creation of books and pamphlets during this period, and some of which specifically related to the play are on display outside in the Berg reading room. At its heart, Wortsman's play is about the battle over knowledge, why we know what we know, why we believe what we believe. Specifically, this drama is about the 16th century battle over Jewish books. Our setting is the Holy Roman Empire, our characters some of the most influential thinkers and rulers of the time. The chief protagonist is Johannes Reuchlin, a humanist scholar and a defender of Jewish books. As many humanist scholars of the time, Reuchlin discovered the need to learn Hebrew. In 1506, 3 years before the encounter we are about to witness, Reuchlin published one of the first Latin handbooks of the Hebrew language, the Rudimentes Hebraicis. From there, he grew as a scholar of the Hebrew letters, passionate about making them available to his Christian readers. Influenced by Pico della Mirandola in Italy, Reuchlin would become one of the first Christian Kabbalists. He was a scholar, a translator, and a devout Christian.
Your betters pass, you Swabian son of a sow.
I'll move it all right, if it please thee, noble.
You filthy swine.
Blessed are the undefiled. How now, Hieronymus, old friend, sainted brother in the word? Your spirit is more real to me and far more dear than all the raving fools in this foul-mouthed bedlam. Another squabble brewing that I'll more than likely be called upon to settle in court sooner or later. You had your lion to stand guard against the world's never-ending intrusions, Hieronymus. My days are wasted listening to the plaints of peasants and peddlers who drag me through the pit of their petty disputes. Only my nights are free to spend with my books. Vayomer Elohim yehi or, vayehi or. And God said, let there be light, and there was light. Wondrous words. The Hebrew syllables burn like fire on my tongue. Blessed be the people of the book. Not that I envy their lot. Oh, Lord. Cursed keepers of thy sacred spark, a flickering beacon lighting the way in this age of darkness.
And on the other side of this conflict, we have Johannes Pfefferkorn, a butcher from Moravia, born in 1469 to a Jewish family. He later converted. A shady character, a convict, a new arrival in Cologne. As a convert to Christianity, he was eager to please his Dominican patrons.
The ark is open, my brothers. Stand and pray. Pray. Pray, I said, on your feet. Louder, I can't hear you. Say your prayers like you made me say mine, over and over again. Don't you remember me? Not sharp enough up here for a scholar, so you learned me how to sharpen my blade to be your ritual slaughterer. But every blade's double-edged, my brothers. Well, the laugh's on you, my brothers. This butcher, maybe he's got no brains, but he's got balls. I've come up in life. No butcher now, baptized in holy water. I'm a new man, a merciful Christian. I'm here to help you Jewish pigs come clean. I come to you today with a message of Christian love. These books are to blame for your black-hearted ways. The fodder of bleating sheep. Ba, ba, Baruch, Attai, and I. Heads up your ashes! The Lord's sunlight burns through the stained glass of the cathedral, but you bury your snouts in your books and tie on your phylacteries. Yoke yourselves up to a lie. Can't you see? I'm trying to better your miserable lot. What did you do when the Savior was born in your midst? Judases, the lot of you, sold him to the Romans for a fistful of silver, and still you won't come clean. The time of reckoning is here.
Thus we have Johannes Pfefferkorn. This unlikely, uneducated man became a powerful force in the battle over Jewish books. 2 years before his interaction with Reuchlin, Pfefferkorn began to publish booklets against his former co-religionist. Judenspiegel, Jewish Mirror, Judenbeichte, Jewish Confession, which is on display outside, Osterbuch, Passover Book, and Judenfeind, the enemy of the Jews. The new technology of print allowed for these works to even exist. They could now be disseminated more broadly and more speedily than during the medieval era, when text had to be painstakingly copied by hand. Pfefferkorn's objectives were clear: mirroring some existing anti-Jewish stances in Western Christian Europe, and they were no doubt shaped by the Dominicans who supported him. Prohibition of usury, forced sermons, proposed expulsion of Jews from some German cities, which we will see briefly later on in the play. But his most infamous activity, which helped him enter the annals of history, was his campaign against Jewish books, a campaign opposed by the Archbishop of Mainz, the Frankfurt City Council, and various German princes, a campaign he brought to the Emperor Maximilian I. In 1510, Reuchlin and Pfefferkorn met.
Another night's been poring over his beloved books. Flower of Germania, Capnian, the rigorous reborn.
Pythagoras, Grandma, the father of Greek philosophy.
Don't you Greek me, my precious little pup, or I'll make your ears ring and your backside burn, and I'll pull your tongue out in good old common German.
Great uncle blinked an eye.
What kind of man prefers a hardwood bench to a warm bed, and the feel of brittle parchment to the warm touch of pink skin? No wonder the wife took flight, and the widowed sister was summoned to make his bed. Call that wisdom, I call it Johann. Johann!
Who's there?
Rise up, uncle. Lord Hermes himself is come a-calling.
Hermes, my bountiful bottom. A rough and rowdy oaf claims to come on imperial business. A greedy thieving peasant, more than likely.
Better not keep Hermes waiting any longer, lest we incur the wrath of Zeus. Show him in, sister, before you faint. We'll get back to our books presently, my little Melanchthon, once we've heard Hermes out.
Uncle,
Yeah?
why can't Socrates ever make up his mind?
That, my dear Melanchthon, is the essence of philosophy. Beds may be made up, but not this muddled bundle of nerves. The philosopher is always of two minds.
Call if it bites. Come along, rapscallion.
Your chambermaid and valet deserve a good dressing down.
My sister and grand-nephew do lack social grace.
1,000 pardons, your lordship.
I'm trying my best to dress them for society. Now then, how can I be of assistance?
Peace be with you, sage of Germania, prince of Christendom. The shadow, the aura, I mean, of thy reputation, sir, glows like a second sun, spilling over the borders of... You are Dr. Reuchlin?
Himself in the flesh, uneclipsed, though I can hardly decipher myself in the glow of such a sunny salute. With whom have I the pleasure?
Thy humble servant, Pfefferkorn, Johannes, like a spice. Shot pepper in the eye of all heretics and disbelievers. I bring salutations from the good friars of Cologne.
The fortress of the faithful.
A friend of the friars myself, and of her ladyship, the saintly Abbess Kunigund. I have here an imperial mandate signed by His Majesty in a matter most dear to my heart and the heart of every God-fearing Christian.
Will you have a seat, sir?
The matter presses. His Highness cannot be kept waiting.
You'll forgive me if I... My children kept me up all night.
Kick in the bum is what the runts understand best.
The books, I meant.
The books?
A bad habit of mine, I speak in metaphor. Books can be as dear to a man as his children, more so to some.
That's quite a pile. A collection of books you've got there, Doctor.
Fond of books yourself, are you, Master Pfefferkorn?
I peruse them.
A printer's reader.
You might say so.
God bless Master Gutenberg and his movable type. The old scribes were so sloppy.
I see you got some Jew books, too.
Do you read Hebrew, Master Pfefferkorn?
I do. Did. The devil's branded me with it.
Branded?
Every wretched letter's a scar on my hide.
Metaphorically speaking.
The rabbis did not spare the rod. My turn now to make them tremble.
Then you're...
I was a Jew.
Jew.
But that's all behind me now, thanks be to God. Baptized in the cusp of my 36th year, along with the wife and children, sins washed clean by the merciful friars of Cologne. I'm a new man, I am, and by God, I swear to drag my former brethren and their bitches who rot in error out of their pigsty or die trying. I'm a good Christian now, like I said, a pious son of Mother Church, sworn to cleanse the whole stinking lot. In hot blood or holy water, let them take their pick.
The latter, I sincerely hope.
Right. About the matter of the Emperor's mandate, His Reverence Prior Hoogstraten thought you might agree to help?
Brother Jacob, the papal inquisitor?
A friend and ally in my sacred mission.
Oh, I am perplexed, Master Pfefferkorn. Do you come on the business of the emperor, the prior, or the pope?
My business is God's business.
Well spoken. I humbly stand corrected. The mandate, I mean, whose seal and signature does it bear, sir?
Signed and sealed by the Emperor on the prior's prompting and my expert advice.
Well, I am truly flattered that Brother Jacob would seek a lawyer's counsel in a spiritual matter of interest to His Imperial Majesty. How may I be of assistance?
By your gentle powers of persuasion, Doctor.
My powers of persuasion?
With the Jews. Get them to give up their books and spare us the trouble of rooting them out.
I'd be honored to help His Imperial Highness, as I did his noble father of blessed memory when he set out to build his library.
Not build, burn.
Come again, Master Pfefferkorn? I don't believe I heard you right.
Just the Jew books.
If His Highness wishes to acquire examples of their sacred literature, I'm sure I can advise
Not
him.
to acquire, to feed a bonfire, a plague on every page.
To which books in particular are you referring, Master Pfefferkorn?
The whole damn lot of them.
Oh, surely not the 5 books of Moses. The very foundation of our Christian faith.
The Bible accepted, but all the rest.
Not their prayer books.
Hymnals of the howling wolf pack.
But surely their hymnals are harmless enough.
Harmless, says he. 3 times a day, those laughing hyenas curse us in their prayers.
The Talmud, too?
Oh, most especially the Talmud. With every other word of that devil's cookbook of incantations and potions, they poison the minds of innocent babes.
I had no idea.
You're full to bursting with insults against the Savior and his apostle it is. The Talmud's the manual of their faith, keeps the lot of them stiff-necked and fearless.
Tell me, Master Pfefferkorn, what are the most insidious passages?
Most what?
The vilest parts.
That'd be hard to say, sir. There's so many.
For curiosity's sake, one bibliophile to another.
Take my word for it, Doctor. The poison soaked into the paper. Every crooked letter's dripping with venom. By this mandate, the Emperor made me his stalwart right arm to gather up all of the Jews' books in the empire.
I see.
No man in Christendom knows the truth of it better than I, and you too, of course, Dr. Reuchlin. Everyone's read your
De Rudimentis Hebraicis.
That's the ticket. First Hebrew primer written by a Christian. I wager you can out-Jew the lot of them. Beat them at their own game, eh?
Master Pfefferkorn exaggerates my modest abilities.
Are you with us?
Oh, yes, of course. You have my complete and utter... Everything appears to be quite in order. Oh, but wait. What's this? There's an error here.
A mistake in the emperor's mandate? Impossible.
Nothing's impossible, my good man, when it comes to human error. Even the Apostle Luke erred in his transcription. A careless clerk at court, no doubt, the dates in the wrong place. A minor error, I grant you, but an error all the same. I'm afraid it invalidates the legality of the document.
Legal flim-flam.
Flim-flam, perhaps, but the law's the law. I'm afraid you'll have to take it back to the palace for redrafting.
I'll have it redrafted, I will. Only this time, by God, I'll get the mandate branded, if I have to, on every rabbi's stinking bum and make them bear it to the congregants come Sabbath to be read out loud in place of their damn Torah. Wherever they put the date, on either ass cheek or dead center, it's doomsday for the Jews.
In an awful hurry, Master Hermes was.
His zeal for God is laudable, only the wisdom is somewhat lacking. Still, I'd best make inquiries into the matter at court.
What matter, Johann?
It's about the Jews' books.
Devil's own dust mills.
For dust thou art, and unto dust shalt thou return. Every fleck's a splinter of eternity. Seriously, Elsa, can you imagine? Master Hermes and his Dominican friends are keen to kindle their hearth fire with the Talmud.
Paper burns better than bark.
In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Gospel truth, Elsa, that no man dare burn the sacred syllables of creation.
Let the Jews mind their own business, and you, dear brother, mind yours. May I remind the sage of Germania that it is his legal practice, not his high-minded musings, that puts bread and meat on his table?
It is my business, Elsa, and that of every God-fearing Christian. The Jews' books are the foundation of all that we stand for. Burn their books, and the blessed house of Christendom will come tumbling down.
We Christians build our cathedrals of bricks and mortar, not books, last I looked. You're a jurist, Johann, not a cleric. Better leave the bricklaying to the masons and the theologizing to the monks.
You sound like a scholastic, sister. Mercy, please keep you to your pots and I to my books. My belly grumbles. What's for the midday meal?
I'll just pop in to say that the side character in the scene, Reuchlin's grandnephew Philip, was none other than the future reformer and follower of Martin Luther, Philip Melanchthon, whom Reuchlin later disowned for following Luther. Melanchthon was 13 when the controversy inspired by Pfefferkorn over Jewish books erupted. Having been taught Hebrew by his great-uncle Reuchlin, he never lost appreciation for the language. In 1549, he published a book emphasizing the importance of Hebrew, the Studio Linguae Hebreae, on the study of the Hebrew language.
Good news, good news. We've got the goods in hand.
Ah, the Lord's own bloodhound, fresh from the hunt. How many rabbits did he bag today?
Worms, Mainz, Bingen, Lorch, Landstein, Deutsch, and Frankfurt on Main cleaned out their larders. 3,000 Jew books in the bag and as many manuscripts waiting for your order to be burned. Their skinny knees were shaking so hard they thought I meant to recircumcise them on the spot.
Let him spare us the details.
Jacob Hochstraten, born in Flemish town of Hochstraten in the province of Antwerp. He was a prior of the Dominican order in Cologne and a professor of theology. He served as a censor and an inquisitor and was generally a polemicist. He would have remained an obscure figure but he became a key player in the Reuchlin-Pfefferkorn controversy, siding with Pfefferkorn and attacking Reuchlin. He later played a role in combating Luther's supporter, helping create the first Protestant martyrs, Johann Esch and Heinrich Voss, who were burned at the stake in 1523 in Brussels.
If it please your reverence.
Well done, Pfefferkorn. I do commend you. I understand our faithful emissary took a little detour on the way home.
Detour, your reverence?
Stopped off in Stuttgart, I'm told.
So I did.
Paid a call on our friend Dr. Johannes Reuchlin. How is the old bookworm?
Ailing.
So are we all, alas. I remember perusing Dr. Reuchlin's German missive, Why the Jews Subsist So Long in Exile.
His missus?
His missive. A prescription of their sins. Quite proficient for a lay scholar. I take it we can count on his cooperation?
Gave me his personal assurance he did. Still, I couldn't quite figure him out.
The butcher of Frankfurt couldn't figure out the sage of Germania. Now there's a surprise.
The funny thing was, he
He
nitpicked.
He what?
Split hairs. Said the date wasn't in the proper place.
Did he now?
A misplaced date, said he, invalidates the document. Date be damned, says I. Upside down or right side up, any way you want it. The books are bound for the bonfire.
With God's help and the Emperor's blessing.
Amen.
Still, we best keep an eye on our friend, Dr. Reuchlin. Wouldn't want the old fox to beat us to the chicken coop. The Jews have the influence at court, I hear. Money talks, as you well know. Master Peppercorn. And we understand His Imperial Majesty is in chronically short supply.
But His Majesty gave me his mandate.
Mandates are but a slip of paper. Emperors change their minds. I suggest our bloodhound pay another call on his influential lady friend.
Lady friend?
His Highness's high-strung sister.
The Abbess Gunagund. She and I have formed a spiritual bond based on our common faith.
Now fire up her faith, then, wherever it lodges. Oh, yes, there's one more thing. How's your Latin?
Coming along.
Can't turn a butcher into a Bible scholar overnight, can we? Would our newly minted scholar be so good as to sign his name to another little learned diatribe concerning the practices of his former co-religionists? It's a text I had our scribes compile in his behalf. Thanks to Master Gutenberg, Dr. Pfefferkorn's writings are rapidly outpacing Dr. Reuchlin's at the Frankfurt Book Fair.
The battle of the books between Pfefferkorn and Reuchlin was only possible because of the invention of the printing press. Now, the Frankfurt Fair was established...
Which profile suits me best, I wonder? Posterity will see us through the draftsman's eyes. Let future generations know what kind of man Maximilian was, with a chin strong as the good Lord made it, full of resolve, sign of a born leader. Oh, but for God's sake, let Dora do something about these droopy eyes.
Dr. Johannes Reuchlin!
Show him in.
Your humble servant, sire.
Why, bless me, it's my bookish barrister, judge of the Swabian Bund. Just the man I need to distract me from the miserable affairs of state. Spain is scheming, Rome and Paris plotting, Hungary hungering, the Netherlanders needling. I'm too prudent for a patchwork peace, too poor for a proper war.
Greatness, sire, comes at a cost. The meek may run like water channeled by the riverbed. Great men must hack out their paths in the thicket of history.
Can you read the stars, Dr. Reuchlin? I like a man with a second face.
Nearsighted and ignorant in the art of stargazing, sire, I am content to adore what God hath wrought and read what man hath writ about it.
They say you're better read than any man in Christendom.
Oh, there are many better read than I, but I do admit a weakness for words.
Caesar's words outlived the thrust of Brutus's sword. Gaul is forgotten. Caesar's sense of it survives. But what do we know of Charlemagne save what an anemic monk saw fit to scratch on parchment in between matins and mass? Battles are won with the sword, victory sealed with the stylus. Like Caesar, I mean to put my own stamp on history. Been dictating a monument to myself in words. Listen. When a man dies, his deeds do not follow him, and whosoever does not build himself a memorial to himself during his lifetime has no memorial after his death and is forgotten with the bells. I'll give it to you to read once it's done.
I'm honored, sire, at your trust. Your subjects will forever treasure every noble syllable.
God and Gutenberg willing. But what business brings you to court?
It's about the books your highness has requisitioned.
What books?
Perhaps I've been misinformed.
Misinformed of what?
Of an imperial order to confiscate the Jews' books, sire.
The Jews and their infernal books be damned. Must Rome keep meddling in my affairs of state? Are the Pope's monks not satisfied with the wording of my mandate?
Historically, Rome had a troubled relationship with the Holy Roman Empire, an on and off relationship, depending on political alliances of the time. For example, in the early 16th century, Pope Julius II had managed to bring Maximilian I and the King of France, the Holy Roman Emperor's historical enemy, in an alliance against Venice. But such political alliances lasted only so long as the interest made them valuable.
I speak not for Rome or Cologne, sire, but for myself.
Oh, thanks be to God. I thought I'd lost my best barrister to the cloth.
A judge's robes itch less than a cassock and a cowl.
Better satin than sackcloth, eh, Doctor? What would you then of me?
Selfish concern, sire. I fear the loss of my library.
Is that all? Let him rest assured no bailiff will lay a finger on his precious volumes.
And the Jews, sire, what of their books?
Since when is Dr. Reuchlin concerned for the goods of the godless Jews?
Oh, not for their good, sire, but for the wisdom they hoard.
Between you and me, Doctor, if the Jews must forfeit a worm-eaten tome or two, surely they're rich and sly enough to buy back copies from their brethren in Constantinople. And yet, the matter of the Jews' books will be taken under consideration. My campaigns against the infernal French and the traitorous lowlanders are draining my coffers. Perhaps the Jews' bountiful brethren can be persuaded to lend their support. Where there's a Jew, there's the jingle of gold. Wars are a costly enterprise, and money buys influence.
His Highness's sister, the Prioress Kunigunde von Bayern.
If you'll excuse us, Doctor. Show her in. I wonder what that vixen wants of me. Buck up, cheeks. Sag not for posterity. Kunigunde, dear sister, what an unexpected pleasure. Come, take a look at the handiwork of our master Dürer. I commend him to you. With a few strokes he can confer immortality. I'll have him cut your portrait too, if your sacred virtue permits it, sister.
Ah!
Sister, what ails you? Is it an apoplexy, evil humor?
Ah!
I'll call my physician.
No! Heaven help me! Not that accursed Jew.
Accursed perhaps, but skillful, sister. My doctor's purgatives work wonders.
Your Highness, please, my plaint is not physical.
Rise, Kunigunde, let us look at you. Widowhood has not wholly robbed you of your charms.
Brother, beware. Lend not your ear to the Jews' perfidious wiles.
For heaven's sake, stop this unseemly nonsense, sister.
Sister to Saint Clarissa, sire.
Twice sister, then. The nunnery, I fear, has blanched your rosy complexion and addled your brain. The business of state, sister, is no business of yours.
Mine is God's business.
I'll leave you, woman, to your own divine devices and bid you not meddle in mine.
Rumor has it that His Highness might be swayed to reverse his mandate to confiscate the Jews' books. For the sake of our father's memory, listen to your conscience, sire. Let the mandate stand.
Stop this foolishness, then, and let me look at you, sister. The eyes still sparkle, surely not for the Savior's sake. Forget about the Jews' damn books. Tell us which fair-haired young confessor has won your heart.
Piety is my only passion, righteousness my only purpose.
Pig-headed as ever, I see, only the whims have changed.
The will of God is no whim. Has my lord forgotten his sacred trust as Holy Roman Emperor?
The imperial tiara of which that weasel in Rome refuses to place on my head. Let that damn Medici keep his nose out of Habsburg business, and let me rule my realm as I see fit, or by God, I'll have myself anointed pope in his place.
You blaspheme, brother!
Frivolity suits you better than piety, sister. Come, let us talk of cheerier matters. I killed a stag and 2 boars on yesterday's hunt. I can smell them roasting.
What makes you waver from your firm resolve, sire? Are you blinded by the shimmer of gold and silver?
Woman, hold your poisonous tongue. I've had enough.
Tear it out, if it please you, sire. Our Lord and his saints suffered worse for truth eternal.
Sister, you are a sainted fool.
God's fool.
That's 2 fools that offered me their tongues in one day.
The Apostle Paul says the godless Jews will be drawn in droves across the Red Sea of doubt to admit the error of their ways. Their books alone keep them stiff-necked.
Who spoon-fed you such wisdom?
A wise and noble new Christian, a convert to our cause.
The man you sent to twist my ear.
Be steadfast in your judgment.
And you, sister, desist from your folly.
You waver still. You who have sworn to lead a crusade against the Turks.
Crusading is a costly cause.
Christ drove out the moneylenders.
His business was celestial. Mine is more mundane.
Then do like the sainted King Louis of France did with the Jews. Chase them out and pocket their property.
We will look into the matter. Now, let us retire. I smell the stag turning on the spit, a perfume more beguiling than that of smoking parchment. The table's set. I'll be along presently, sister.
If it please you, my lord.
The Jews' books be damned! I'll have my Lord High Chancellor appeal to all the major faculties of theology in Europe and solicit their opinions in the matter of the Jews' books, and we'll put this bloody business to rest once and for all. Be sure the Chancellor includes that steely Dominican, Prior Hoogstraten of Cologne, and my bookish barrister, Reuchlin. Better let the theologians stew on it a while. And I to lunch.
How saith the theological faculty of the University of Cologne?
Burn the books!
How saith Mainz?
Burn the books!
How saith Heidelberg?
Burn the books!
How saith Erfurt?
Burn the books!
How saith his reverence Jacob von Hoogstraten?
Burn the books.
I, Johannes Reuchlin of Pforzheim,
Professor of philosophy and doctor of imperial law, the pompous old windbag, do offer my eternally devoted and willing service.
Let's listen in, shall we? I love a good cockfight.
If I may, Reuchlin was drawn into the controversy against his will. After his initial encounter with Pfefferkorn, he preferred not to get involved with the questions of Jewish books. But when the Archbishop of Mainz asked him to write an opinion, just like the other theologians of Cologne, Mainz, Heidelberg, and Erfurt, he did. He was the only dissenting voice. The Archbishop forwarded the emperor the recommendation that the Jewish books should be confiscated, examined, and only those found blasphemous should be burned.
As your obedient servant, I hereby acknowledge with profound reverence the receipt of the charge and order of His Imperial Majesty, wherein I am asked to probe in a thorough manner the matter of the Jews' sequestered books. Though well aware that I am far too insignificant to comment on such weighty legal matters that concern the good of the Christian Church.
There's an understatement. Goats graze on bitter weeds and make sweet milk of it.
And from the self-same flour do honeybees derive their sweet honey, and spiders their deadly poison.
Spare us the poetry, man, and cut to the quick.
Hush now, spider.
For as to matters of faith, they, the Jews, are of the opinion that their faith is true and ours is untrue. Indeed, certain Jews hold the view that every nation ought to be allowed to practice its own faith.
Blasphemy!
I'll give you that, you hooded toad. Sustained.
The Jew is as worthy in the eyes of our Lord God as am I. If he stands upright, he stands before his Lord. If he falls before his Lord. How can we pass judgment on the soul of another? Have not the books of the ancient poets been preserved, though they contain much more scandalous things than are to be found in the Talmud, and stand in much greater contrast to our Christian faith?
Touché. That's one for the doctor.
Someone who wishes to study the scriptures might well object, I will gladly make do with our own commentaries. But why do I need the commentaries of the Jews? Here I have a ready reply. Whoever is obliged to make do is at a distinct disadvantage, like a man in winter with nothing to wear but pants.
Heretic!
Pull up your skirts and hold your tongue!
Further, as subjects of the Holy Roman Empire, the Jews have a recourse to protection under imperial law. As the law prescribes, no man may have his possessions confiscated by force. Every man must be assured of his right to protection of his lawful practices, customs, and property.
From this we may conclude, according to Roman law, that we also may not take their books away from them against their will. From this day forth, my mortal enemy.
For books are as dear to some as their children.
Mark him now, there's spikes in his thrust.
Do we not, in our common usage, follow the parlance of the poets, for whom the books they write are in the matter of speaking children of the soul?
Bastards of the flesh, more likely. From the two aforementioned articles of law, we may derive conclusively
that we should not burn the Jews' books.
A hit, a palpable hit.
And that through logical discourse we should convince them with gentle persuasion and kindness, and with God's help to accept our faith.
Most noble Lord, gracious sire, I duly declare that I do hereby submit my written word and my recommendation as a humble subject, and that I have knowingly written nothing save that which is sanctioned by your lordship and the Holy Christian Church. To this I do solemnly swear and sign respectfully. Ever your lordship's and his majesty's loyal subject and willing servant, Johannes Reuchlin, Doctor of Law.
Bravo, doctor. Here's rich food for thought and sound arguments aplenty to silence our sister and her monkish pack. If by Roman law the emperor is the supreme sovereign of his subjects and guardian of their property, then by Roman law let Rome keep its nose out of the empire's business. What gain in Jewish loss? Their books are worth far more to us returned than burned. For Jewish gratitude has a giddy ring. And where's the harm in twisted words no Christian can comprehend?
We'll give Dr. Reuchlin a taste of gentle persuasion and kindness. Eh, Pfefferkorn?
Your Reverence?
We'll have his precious parchment and his hide. Burn the blasphemer along with his books. We'll attack him on his own turf. Lambaste the scoundrel with the profane tables of the Frankfurt Book Fair and the sacred steps of the cathedral.
Who will?
You will.
My friend, fellow Christians, even as the sun
shines bright on the sacred steps of this house of God.
Even as the sun shines bright on the sacred steps of this house of God,
darkness. Dear God, cast his pall in a far corner of your fair city.
dark God cast his balls on a fair corner of your far city. I'll put it in plain German. The devil likes the dark, and so do his cronies. Even as we come to say Mass, the evil one and his chosen fellows, the Jews, huddle in their temple, muttering "Fie, fie, fie" in their infernal tongue, cursing our Lord and his mum, laughing behind our backs. Good friends and fellow Christians, the Jews have a diabolical book they call the Talmud. They love it like a child, almost more than life itself. They read from its tattered pages day and night. They shove it down the throats of their young and make them repeat it. Good God-fearing Christians, beware. Keep to your scriptures, but steer clear of that twisted script, else you be bewitched and forsake the true path. Its pages are spotted with lies. It is stained with the foulest blasphemies, the like of which I dare not repeat on the steps of this sacred place, else I be struck down by lightning. But all is not lost. Fear not, gentle Christians. I have a remedy in hand, a powerful antidote to their deadly poison. By this mandate, His Imperial Highness, the good Maximilian, has empowered me to ferret out every last Talmud and other vile Jew book in his kingdom and feed them to the flames. But hear me, my friends. One man stands in our way. A Christian, a scholar, a man of the law. This two-faced turncoat who pretends to know the Talmud better than I do pleads its innocence. The man's a puppet. His lips may move, but the words didn't grow on his tongue. What true, God-fearing Christian could mouth such lies and not gag on him? Debt drove him to it, my friends. Debt drove him, I tell you, into the hands of a horned moneylender to whom he's bound body and soul. This man, this traitor to his faith, this heretic, I dare not even name him.
Out with it!
Go on, tell us his name.
He's a doctor, I'm told, a man of book learning. He speaks honeyed words, but the poison drips from his lying Judas tongue.
The name, by God!
We want the name.
Can sin have a Christian name?
Out with it, man!
Can treachery nominate?
Name, we want the name.
Then name him I will. But never heard I a more despicable string of sounds. Dr. Johannes Reuchlin. Pity his poor lost soul.
After Reuchlin defended Jewish books in 1511, Pfefferkorn attacked Reuchlin in a published pamphlet, Augenspiegel wider und gegen die Juden, Hand Mirror about and against the Jews. Reuchlin quickly responded by publishing his official recommendation, from which we have heard, with annotations under a title Augenspiegel, or eyeglass, and the original copy of the work is outside on display. Reuchlin was condemned by the Cologne theologians, and he was eventually brought before the Inquisitional court, a summons he ignored. Pfefferkorn continued his attacks, and humanists across Europe came to Reuchlin's defense. The Reuchlin-Pfefferkorn controversy turned from a dispute over Hebrew books to a full-fledged battle between humanists and scholastic theologians. Hochstraten took Reuchlin to a papal court, first at Speyer, and when that court ruled in favor of Reuchlin, he took him to court in Rome. There, humanists lobbied on behalf of Reuchlin, and in 1516, the Pope suspended the investigation. But the controversy would not end here. and the world was changing.
Ah!
Stop! Enough! I haven't finished. Enough. Thank you. If I might. This is important. So now, 1520. A lot has changed in 4 years since the Pope suspended Reuchlin's case in Rome. By the end of 1516, Hochstraten was no longer the prior in Cologne, though he still retained his function as an inquisitor. In 1517, Martin Luther wrote his 95 Theses, and by 1520, his teachings were known across Europe and condemned by many. So threatening were they that Pope Leo X issued a bull excommunicating Luther that year. Luther received support from prominent barons and princes in the Holy Roman Empire. One of them was Franz von Sickingen, a powerful knight who supported Luther and protected humanist scholars. In January 1519, Emperor Maximilian died. Chaos ensued. That year, Franz von Sickingen intervened with the Dominican order in Cologne on behalf of Reuchlin. It was also during this interregnum that the beleaguered, but until then imperially protected, Jewish community of Regensburg was finally expelled. Here we see the two events simultaneously.
There's a wake-up call! A matin's bell for you, Hoogstraten. Do you hear it, or shall I have my lads sound it again? We will break down the door!
Kill the Jew!
Let their go!
Don't let him get away!
Better wake up and say your prayers, you and your gowned goons. Your unsexed procurators pimping for the Pope. Call off your bloodhounds and leave my old master in peace.
Who are you, and what in heaven's name are you blathering about, Sir Knight?
Franz von Sickingen, at your service, Father. My master's name is known throughout the Empire and Christendom.
Pray then make it known to me.
Johannes Reuchlin, Doctor of Law.
That pig-headed old fool.
I'll not have the Pope's pimp sully such a noble name. Better swallow your words, Friar, or I'll ram them down your throat and pluck them out the other end, entrails and all.
No need to get it so excited, Sir Knight. We have no argument with your master. It's the perfidious Jews and their false books we're after. Let him leave off defending their unholy lies and leave us to our sacred work.
I don't give a damn about the Jews or their books. You can disembowel and burn the lot of them for all I care and wipe their bleeding arses with pages torn from their Talmud. Just leave my teacher alone.
You have my word, Sir Knight. We will not touch a hair on his head. Call off your men.
I have your word.
I swear it. Let Dr. Reuchlin desist, and the church will sing his praises.
Rejoice, good people of Regensburg, the pestilence is past. Your fair city is Jew-free.
Hochstraten had been humiliated by humanists in satirical publications and stripped of his position as the prior of Cologne's Dominicans. But he was not ready to lose. In 1518, he published an apologia dedicated to Pope Leo X, and then, 2 years later, a book against Kabbalah, which was a response to Reuchlin's De Arte Kabbalistica. In 1520, in light of the chaos of the Reformation and the spread of what the Catholic Church considered dangerous heresy, Pope Leo X returned to the Reuchlin's case.
This trial is called to order by His Reverence, the Central Librorum of the Holy See, to rule upon the erroneous and heretical content of certain texts by one Dr. Johannes Reuchlin.
If thine eye offend thee, pluck it out and cast it from thee. It is better for thee to enter into life with one eye, rather than having two eyes to be cast into hellfire. Seeing, as the defendant evidently prefers the commentary of the perfidious Jews to the sage words of our Christian exegetes, and his arguments are built on a stack of lies, I hereby urge the court to commit his own lying books to the flames, along with the Talmud.
Objection! Is the inquisitor not jumping to hasty and unfounded conclusions? Court permitting, the defense requests leave to read into the record a letter from Erasmus of Rotterdam, a friend of all good Christians.
Granted.
Hear what Erasmus wrote. Should there be any faults in Dr. Reuchlin's reasoning, as well there might, since he is only human and fallibility is an all too human trait, it would, with all due respect to the arguments of his worthy critics, be wiser and more merciful to smother these faults in the mantle of Christian love than to fan the flames of revolt with their burning.
This trial is assured.
Mistake not poison oak for harmless weeds, I pray. It would be most unwise for His Holiness to give the impression of weakness and indecision at this time of great unrest, lest his misguided flock in our lands confuse Reuchlin's folly with Luther's rebellion.
Very well. The trial of Dr. Reuchlin is once again called to order.
Let the court consider Dr. Reuchlin's false and heretical interpretation of John 5:39, in which he claims that Jesus Christ condoned the study not only of the Bible, but also of the rabbinical commentaries. Was it not an honest new Christian who confirmed that Talmudic teachings are irreconcilable with the Christian faith? This same new Christian has written that the Talmud includes, among other scurrilous passages, one in which our Lord is dubbed a bastard, born of Mary and a Roman soldier, and further, that the Lord lands in hell for making light of rabbinical teachings, of all the profanities most foul.
Fie on the faithless liar and his foul lies.
I wrote nothing but what I in good faith believed to be true. If the book contains slander against our Christian faith, then pray enlighten us as to the page and paragraph so that we may consider it.
The passage escapes me now, but the memory makes me shudder.
Slander slays three persons, the Talmud says: the speaker, the listener, and the object of its calumny. Did not the Holy Roman Emperor himself, the late Maximilian, read my opinion, and did he not thereafter command that those books that had been seized should be forthwith returned into the hands of their rightful owners?
That was the empire, Doctor. This is Rome.
By order of His Holiness Pope Leo X, the writings of Dr. Johannes Reuchlin, while not deemed of a heretical nature, are nevertheless declared anathema to church doctrine. Their publication and dissemination is henceforth prohibited, and their author is henceforth bound to silence.
talking in his sleep.
To Hieronymus, I imagine.
Who?
An old friend.
What friend is that? None come a calling no more. Bless you, Master Philip. You're the only living soul to call in months, except for the surgeon who comes to bleed him daily. It's your great nephew here to see you, Doctor.
Grow some whiskers on that baby face, Philip, and they'll make you a professor yet.
You seem to have managed well enough without.
The chin is fallow, but the old head is still pregnant with thought.
Athena sprung full-grown from Zeus's skull, armed and ready for battle.
A mere mortal, every brainchild of mine comes out besotted or stillborn.
Uncle, it's so good to see you, but what a sight.
By which Melanchthon means to pay old Capnian a backhanded compliment.
By which I mean to express concern.
I can look after myself quite well, thank you.
It's a scandal the sage of Germania should have to live like this.
We have both been schooled in scandal and disgrace.
Uncle, you are a living legend, an inspiration to us all.
My inspiration has expired.
Your name is still on everyone's lips. Why, just last week, Luther was saying at table how he'd never have dared tackle the translation of the Bible without the help of your Hebrew grammar.
The Bible didn't need retranslating. A better man than Luther already did the job once.
The people speak German. No miller or baker babbles church Latin.
The people would do well to learn it.
My dear uncle, what made you such a bitter man?
Bitter? Me? Goats graze on bitter herbs and make sweet milk of it, and from the self-same flour do honey bees derive their sweet honey, and spiders their deadly poison, if I may cite myself.
Your words are still honey to me. Luther, Houghton, we'd all welcome you with open arms as a conquering hero, the man who dared stand up to Rome.
As you can see, I sat down again.
Hoogstraten, the pig-headed old goat, is well cared for by a grateful church, as is his fat lackey Pfefferkorn. But by God, Uncle, you made them all tremble in their boots.
Yeah, I made a fool of myself. Spent every last penny and every waking moment of this last miserable decade in my defense.
History is made by fools like you.
History is made by emperors and popes. The rest had best tuck in their tails and cower in the shadows of the great.
Join us, Uncle. The reformers need men of conscience and principle. But here, I almost forgot. Luther charged me to transmit this missive. God's grace and peace be upon you, my esteemed and worthy friend. The time for silence has passed. The time for action has come. You paved the way, and we but follow. All men of Christian faith and German spirit revere the name of Reuchlin.
Then let him reverence me with silence.
Listen to Luther, not Romans, but Germans of Christian conscience.
Enough!
Luther worships you.
Luther worships the idol of vanity.
The Pope's the prince of idol worshippers. Did he not betray your trust?
The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Meek as a lamb, I lay my head in the lap of Mother Church. In his infinite wisdom, His Holiness, Pope Leo's condemnation proved a blessing in disguise, relieving me of the burden of defense. They stopped hounding me and turned the dogs on Luther. Got all my time for study now. The bitter irony is that I'm too feeble to lift the cover of a book.
Von Sickingen calls you a coward, and worse. History, he says, has passed you by.
And you, my dear Melanchthon, what do you call me?
Me?
A shame. I always thought I'd leave you my library, my most precious possession, till you squandered every seed of wisdom I ever sowed in your swell-headed skull and joined up with Luther's wolf pack.
Fie on your books, Uncle. I did not come to collect my inheritance.
Remember Euthyphro?
Who?
Oh, by God, Philip, I hope you haven't forgotten your Greek.
Whatever that honeyed tongue communicated to these dumb ears will forever echo in the hot air chamber in between.
Euthyphro and Socrates were quibbling over some paltry matter. What was it now?
They were debating the meaning of piety. You know that, Uncle. Stop testing me.
Me testing you? Young Euthyphro, if I recall correctly, condemned his own father for piety's sake.
Never, Uncle, could I condemn you. A philosopher is always of two minds.
A heavy load for one rickety pair of shoulders, I fear.
Two minds, but one heart. God be with you, Captain Ian.
God be with you, Melanchthon. Reform the world, if you must. Oh, dear God. We've made such a mess of your miraculous creation. Some are hell-bent to burn it, others to reform it, yet others to make it stand still. Caught in between their ridiculous tug of war, all I ever wanted was to be left in peace to read. Oh, Lord. I feel outdated, obsolete, a dusty old anachronism. as ancient as the Jews, rejected by Rome, crushed by Cologne, enticed by Luther's wolf pack in Wittenberg. God help me. And now I say, no Jerusalem. This stubborn old skull is our only refuge, eh, Hieronymus? Oh, by God, I stood my ground. Oh, my ears are ringing. Bless me, Hieronymus. The lion roars.
Thank you, Peter, for writing such a beautiful piece, and it just came off wonderfully. If people could bear with us for 1 minute, I'm going to introduce a panel, and we're going to talk for a few minutes. We're getting a change of the chairs. If not, we have 4 microphones. Just come on up. We'll figure it out. So we have Mark Silk will be our moderator. He's the director of the Leonard Greenberg Center for Study of Religion in Public Life and a professor of religion in public life at Trinity College. You can come up and... he writes a blog for the religion news service called Spiritual Politics. Magda Tedder, who you heard from as the commentator, is a scholar of early modern religious and cultural history and the Schvidler Chair in Judaic Studies and professor of history at Fordham University. Peter Wortsmann, who wrote the play, is going to join us. He's an author in many modes: fiction, drama, travel, writing, and translation. And Max Schulman, who directed this piece, is also joining us. He lectures at Ramapo College and Rutgers University. So if we could have everyone come up.
Well, without further ado, I'm delighted to be here and serve as a moderate a few comments from the panel, but I would love to get as quickly, pretty quickly, to questions from the audience. So think of some. But I'd like to begin by asking Peter to tell us a little bit about how this play came about and where he's coming from in this whole endeavor.
First, I want to thank you all for coming today on this Sunday. I had a dream this morning, and I wasn't going to tell you about this, but I had a dream. My father died in many years ago in 1979. I had a dream that I was standing beside his body, and his head was wrenched to the side, and I moved his head slightly to the pillow, and I felt that he smiled. So I felt that he's smiling on me now. But I want to dedicate today's performance to Abdel Kader Haidara. This may sound unlikely to you, but this is a brave man in Timbuktu who in 2013, when Boko Haram was charging in and when other wild hordes of ignorance were threatening ancient manuscripts in Mali, this man and a group of people around him risked their lives to bury and protect ancient texts. I think Reuchlin would have smiled on him, and I'm saluting him today in the context of a world gone mad. How I came to this story, very briefly, I am the child of refugees from another madness, the madness of Nazi Germany. My parents fled that country, ended up finally in America. I was obsessed for many years by the Shoah. I traveled around Vienna and Eastern Europe in the 70s, interviewing people, but I came to a sense that I was at, literally and figuratively, a dead end, that there was nowhere further to go, that I had no answers to what happened. And this took me back in time to earlier period. I wanted to understand something about this cultural marriage of peoples, a complex and stormy wedding between Jews and Germans that starts when the Roman armies came down the Rhine, bringing Jews and Jewish settlements along. The history of the Jews goes back very far, that continued for centuries, sometimes in periods of calm, sometimes in horrible pogroms, particularly at the time of the Black Plague, in which the Jews were falsely accused of poisoning the wells and were slaughtered. I wanted to understand something about this cultural marriage to which, in many ways, the institute that is presenting us here today, the Leo Baeck Institute, is committed. A cultural marriage between Germans and Jews that gave rise in the 20th century to some of the heights of thinking. Can we imagine Einstein? Can we imagine Freud? Can we imagine Wittgenstein without the crossroads between Semitic and Teutonic? Without this link between somewhere the eternal nomads with which I identify myself and the Hebrew tongue and the German tongue. I was mystified. How did it come to this? But I wanted to go back in time. I came back to the United States after 2 years in Europe, and I went for an MA in German literature because I started writing in German, and I write in German today, among other languages. In a class on the humanists, in a footnote to a footnote on Erasmus, I found reference to a man named Reuchlin and the fact that he had written a text that had a hand in the preventing of the burning of the Talmud. I was completely amazed. I dug up this text. I found that it had never been translated into English, and I am proud to say that I first translated the first time in 500 years into English. I continued to be astounded by this text, that words written by a man in 1510 reached beyond his own prejudices. He, like all of his contemporaries, his non-Jewish contemporaries, believed that the Jews should convert to Christianity. But there were something in this text that reached beyond that moment in time, far into the future, somewhere a voice of tolerance that moved me profoundly. And then the characters just leapt off the page. Maximilian, who we see immortalized in portraits of Albrecht Dürer, the artist who comes into his own in the court of Maximilian. Maximilian's sister Kunigunde, who had married her father's mortal enemy, and to make amends when her husband died, joins a nunnery and becomes a mouthpiece of the Dominicans. Pfefferkorn, who is in many ways the great mystery to me. How does a man betray his own people, betray everything that he stands for? And in a secret way, the play for me is really about Pfefferkorn. What makes it? It's a head-on collision between these two. But so I've said enough. That's what led me to this story, and I hope that it plays a small role in reigniting interest in this story and in this man, and reminding us that we are on the edge of elements of our own dark ages right now, with fanatics of all stripes battling it out. And we live in a dangerous time, and we should remember the voice and the spirit of this great man. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you for a really wonderful play, and I'm looking forward to reading the whole play, since we just have a part. I want to ask Magda, I have the burden of having been trained as a historian, so there are niggling questions always, but the person who really finally decides this case never appears on stage. That is Pope Leo X. Pope Leo, is referred to in the version that we just heard as a Medici Pope. He was the first Medici Pope. He was educated by humanists in Florence, some of these Kabbalists. The work of Reuchlin on the Kabbalah was dedicated to him, as was Erasmus's Facing Latin and Greek Bible. So he was a humanist. And so he then arrives at condemning Reuchlin's work in the midst of the very early Reformation, in which there was a desire to burn a lot of Protestant books. So my question is really, what do we know about that decision of Pope Leo's? Can we say anything more about what led to do that, other than the surmise of circumstance?
Well, I'm not sure I can answer this question, but I mean, Leo is a complicated character for that period, and he is thrown into this era of chaos following the Luther's rebellion against the church. So many of the responses to Jews, Leo's, and even later have to be seen in the context of the threat that's coming from Luther and from his followers and later reformers, if we look further ahead. So the change of opinion, again, it's sort of hedging bets here. He is not condemning Luther. He is he's equivocating on this decision, but it has to be seen in the context of what that might mean, and what it might mean for the church in terms of leading to further heresy.
Okay. Finally, Max, the question I have for you is, would you like to direct a full-dress performance of this?
Yeah, I would. I would love to. I think the best way to answer that is just to clarify for everyone that what we miss from Peter's script in this particular forum, and with the kind of goals we had for this performance as opposed to what you would have for a main performance. Certainly, and I also want to say, I sort of need to, is that the amount of work, Magda thought she was joining us for a talkback. And then I said, it would be really great if we could bring more of this history to life through some sort of scholar figure. Would you be interested in maybe writing some of the notes? And she, in her foolishness and excitement, said, I could be the scholar. And next thing you know, she's up here saying, Magda, that your entrance was too fast. Magda, no, having to deal with, okay, we're on in 5, and I'm way out of her comfort zone. So I just have to. I want to express my incredible appreciation for what she made this evening. The other thing that we miss is in this cut is that Peter makes a very interesting attempt to draw attention to, and I don't know if there's any historical document for this, but what we can imagine must have been a very conflicted relationship for Reuchlin with the Jewish community, because you have to imagine that he has sort of staked a claim by defending this body of knowledge that they represent, but in doing so also defending them.
And so the play has a whole other sort of plot line that we don't get into, where we do get to explore his troubled relationship with this community, or his personal conflict over what he's done, that we kind of had to miss for everything else we dealt with. So I would like that. I would like the idea of bringing also that to it if you were able to do a full production. Yeah.
Good. So I'm going to just ask for a couple of comments, if anybody has them, about, in fact, I'll even volunteer one myself, on contemporary applications, since they seem to be around. I mean, certainly Peter mentioned the direct issue of destroying holy books in Mali recently, and that's there. I think one of the things that is distressing about this whole episode, particularly with the denouement, is that actually Reuchlin's winning up until the Reformation. He's protected by the emperor. The Pope does not want to pursue this prosecution, and we see his main persecutors and the Dominican as actually pushed out of office. So it's a good time for liberalism, so to say, until the Reformation, whatever its virtues are, comes along. And I think we see that today in when we are in the midst of terrorism by people acting on behalf of their religious convictions, Muslim terrorists, in one way of saying that, and it doesn't help the overall situation.
And when we have one of the great world leaders as our president currently being blamed for fanaticisms breaking out all over the place.
Well, it's just, it makes people like Reuchlin, Erasmus, and even the Pope, puts them in difficult and not winning positions. But anyway, let's...
I would say that, to me, one of the themes that emerges that seems relevant is the question of expertise knowledge and the weight of expert knowledge versus the opinion or popular understanding. And then that sort of battle where you have whether it is between Pfefferkorn and Reuchlin, the educated Christian men versus the Jewish uneducated men, and whether you have the opinion of some of the faculty, and Reuchlin being the one that is actually expert in the Hebrew language, that again raises the question the weight of expert opinion. And here you see it sort of teetering in and out, but in the end, the opinion versus the expert knowledge seems to have won in the play.
Max, a word, or shall we
I think that's all great. I think the thing that stands out for me is those dangers that we have in the quest for knowledge, and the forces that pose against those kind of progressions, and how we deal with our past and how we deal with those who are unlike us.
Very good.
How infinitely more difficult subtlety is than taking a clear-cut black and white side one way or another. How infinitely difficult subtlety is.
Yes. And with that, we turn to you. There is a microphone moving around, and if possible, just to maximize the number of questions, if you would address your question to a particular person rather than, I hope the whole panel will respond, because then we'll waste your time.
I'd like to ask the author directly. I know we saw an excerpt of the play. I'm curious, in the part that we didn't see, are there conversations or appeals, connections and dialogue between the Jews and Reuchlin? And were you tempted to create a scene between Pfefferkorn and maybe a Jew?
So
in your writing?
There are a number of characters that in this excerpting that are removed. For instance, there's a historical character, Jossel von Rosheim, who was representative of the Jews of Alsace, who tries to intercede on their behalf. And later there's a famous historical text, I don't remember, you would know the wording better than I, where Jossel von Rosheim says, we've experienced a double miracle in our time. Not only was there someone a non-Jew who championed our cause, but our books were protected. Rosheim is a character in the play. There are other characters. There are also, I tried to get at Reuchlin's unconscious. There are dream characters in the play as well. There was no way to include that throughout. So there's a less surface element to the play. The play exists on several sides. So that doesn't really answer the question. But there are, with these dream characters, who was an old Jew and a young Jewish woman, Reuchlin interacts in a kind of a dream-like way. Because I tried to get at somewhere what makes a guy risk as much as he did. And he risked everything, finally. I tried to understand that a little bit. I don't know if I was able to.
My question is about a line that the narrator mentions in the play. After the death of Maximilian, as Martin Luther gets on the ascendancy, the narrator states how humanists supported Luther. My question is, were there really, by our standards, any truly good guys, anyone really defending the Jews? The humanists were defending the most vile anti-Semites. So was anybody really defending the Jews after Maximilian's death? As you showed us, Maximilian himself was not, was a corrupt person. But was anybody defending practically the interests of the Jews after his death?
Well, I just say that it was von Sickingen. The sentence said that von Sickingen was the one who supported Luther and the humanists. But the humanists, we can't speak of the humanists. I mean, there were some who remained Catholic, even as they criticized the church, and who, for instance, defended Reuchlin, like Erasmus from Rotterdam, who wrote an apotheosis of Reuchlin after he died, and yet he was not particularly friendly to Jews, for instance. So, and you have characters in Italy who interacted earlier with Reuchlin, who like Egidio di I'm now blanking on Egidio di Viterbo, right? Who was a humanist and a church figure, who again interceded on this. So again, it's not, we can't, and there is also this geographic divide between the Italians versus the Holy Roman Imperial Northern European humanists. So it's complicated. It's in that way. A typical historian's response. It's complicated.
It does look at the beginning, just to vamp here for a second, as though humanists are going to side with the reformers. Erasmus doesn't go, but in some sense the Reformation project of going back to the sources, of going back to
is
related to a humanistic one. Sorry.
I'd like to ask, were any of Reuchlin's writings placed on the Index Prohibitorium, that is, they were forbidden, considered heretical by the Roman Catholic Church or not?
I actually checked that and I couldn't find it, and the index only came into life in 1549. So it's his books are not. He's not. His name is not on the index, at least not in the editions that I've seen.
Poor Frank's got a lot of running to do.
So there were several times in what we heard that Reuchlin asked for evidence in the Talmud of sacrilege, of defaming the church, and of course Pfefferkorn couldn't answer. But was there, in the course of the trials, does anyone know, was evidence brought ever that there was defamatory material, or was this all just smoke and mirrors? And
I can speak to something else.
No. You
answer and then I'll.
No, I have to admit complete ignorance of the Talmud. I am not particularly, not religiously knowledgeable in that sense, so I don't know.
So yes, of course, there are passages that are offensive to Christianity, and they were, for a long time, they were known. I mean, the Talmud had been condemned and, you know, reauthorized for use after censorship since the 13th century, on and off different ways. And by that time, by the time the Reuchlin Pfefferkorn controversy, we actually have a couple of works in Latin that engage with these passages, anti-Jewish works that are quite respectful of Jews, even as they challenged rabbinic literature, like Galatino's work from late 15th century that was published in Italy. So yes, these things were known, which is why the Dominicans, who are also, you know, behind that, know about these accusations, know against the charges of certain offensive passages in the Talmud and in the prayers.
One thing I'd add to that, and this is really, I would like to make a plug for Peter's translation, which is really worth buying and reading, even more than buying, so you get it out of a library. But
still got to buy it.
But Reuchlin is very, it seems to me, on my reading of it, is pretty cagey about that. He claims that he's never read the Talmud. On the other hand, he says in the course of this defense that, you know, if there are scattered comments here and there in a big text like this, well, why should anybody be surprised? We have anti-Christian language in the Gospels, and that's what people do, but it's nothing to get excited about. So I think he's quite aware when he writes this that there's stuff in there, and he sort of, as a, you know, very serious scholar and intellectual, and especially good lawyer, knows that he has to spike those guns.
He also knew perfectly well that the Talmud had indeed been burnt at the Sorbonne. I can't remember what century. He knew that, and so he knew this perfectly well and never makes reference to that. So indeed, he's a good lawyer.
And the Archbishop's recommendation to requisition, examine, and then only destroy the passages of the books that were, it's also, you know, historically, there's a historical precedent. So again, it's not a new question that emerges in the 16th century, although the new access to new technology, which you ask for the relevance today, we are still reeling from the access to the internet, certainly, you know, plays a role here.
Can I make reference to another amazing aspect? Catalina Vicens, who's with us here today, composed or recomposed, I'm not sure the words how to put it, this astounding music that we heard just excerpts from. The music is based on, and she will correct me, is based on students of Reuchlin went to synagogues to listen to cantorial music. We're talking about the early 16th century, and took it seriously enough to make notations, musical notations. And she's compiled a musical piece that was commissioned by the Reuchlin Museum in Pforzheim and was premiered, I think, several weeks ago. The whole work is a profoundly moving piece of music, and also, to my mind, makes Reuchlin all the more complicated an individual. I believe it is the first notation of cantorial music in Christian Europe. I don't think that there's any other. And this makes Reuchlin, he published this, I think, as a page in his Hebrew grammar. This makes him all the more complicated an individual, to my mind.
Okay, I think we have time for a couple more questions. We will follow this up because I'm sure you'll all want a glass of wine, but we want to also liberate some people to do that. There's a question up there, over here. We'll do the best we can.
Did Reuchlin mention in his defense the fact that the Talmud is printed by non-Jews?
The Talmud was studied by non-Jews.
No, the Talmud is printed by non-Jews. Did he mention in his defense? Yes. The Talmud was printed mainly by Bragadin, by Justinian, who were non-Jews, and they made a lot of money of this.
Right, in 15 10, the Talmud, not the whole edition, but certain specific tractates by that time had been published by the Soncino Press. I think Daniel Bomberg doesn't start printing the Talmud until after the Reuchlin's controversy. So, but the point is, yes, the Talmud is now available also in print. So that's and later on, Daniel Bomberg, who sounds Jewish but was not Jewish, published it in Venice, and then other Christian printers, because Jews were not allowed to print Jewish books later on in the 16th century in Italy, were publishing also Jewish books, although the Talmud was banned again in 1550s. So.
It's on. It's on. Okay.
Two more now. One there, one here, then we're done.
Okay. Thank you for a fascinating play and the introduction to an incredible topic. My question is more background. A few times you refer back and forth to the Holy Roman Empire and then Rome. And then when Maximilian died, suddenly we're in Rome. How was it determined who had the final say, and what was the power struggle there between the Holy Roman Empire and Rome?
And we do recommend the hour-long lecture that Magda is about to give now.
I'll just say these are unrelated. This is an imperial struggle that goes back to the Middle Ages over the between papal and imperial power, and the claim to the Roman title is sort of goes back to that thing. I don't want to go to that. But the point is that that the emperor had jurisdiction over those what we would call now German territories, and you know popes always wanted to have influence and all over Christianity.
But I think it is important to mention at this point the old gag that the Holy Roman Empire was neither Holy Roman nor an empire. It was the secular, it was German, and it was a collection of states spread across Central Europe that got together and elected.
There was a map with this sort of mishmash, which you probably would not have recognized as anything, but that was the Holy Roman Empire. That was
exactly. And final question.
Simply, first, thank you. This was an amazing play, but throughout the performance, it just seemed so incredibly contemporary. Did that hit you constantly as you researched this particular time period?
So for me, as I was trying to suggest, unfortunately, perhaps, yes, this is a contemporary theme. I think all history plays, if it's in the least bit successful, it taps history but resonates in the present. These fanaticisms, we're facing them today in a virulent and very dangerous way on all continents, in this continent, on this continent as well, and in our presidential elections. We are hearing things that we haven't heard come out of hiding for the longest time, and that's frightening.
And so
yes.
On that happy note, we will...
I will say, go look at the books. The books are up there.
Thank you very much.